These are only last 5 days, and even after that, these classes of net coaching will also end. So this 2 month journey is a kind of provide a kind of revision for your net exam. It is not that you are only depend yourself on these classes, but you are supposed to do hard work on your own also. So these classes are only to give a kind of example that which kind of questions might be there, which kind of thing they are including in net exam or set exam. So today my topic of presentation is non-fictional work from ancient to contemporary ages. Uh, in the previous lectures, I have dealt with fictional work, Indian writing in English, and then drama, poetry. So now this time I have taken the topic of non-fictional prose from ancient Anglo-Norman period to contemporary period. Okay, so without wasting much time, let me start my presentation. First, let me share my screen. First, to begin with non-fictional work, let me make this point clear that what is non-fiction? The creator of the non-fiction are writing about the truth or accuracy of the events, people, or information. Okay, so in previous lecture, I have explained the fictional work in which all the writers they are writing about imaginary characters or about their imagination, and they are kind of dealing with a false event and everything, or they are also writing symbolic thing. But here in non-fiction, the writers or creators they are supposed to write about the truth or accuracy of the events, about the information that they are getting from everywhere, and then they are supposed to write about that and to open the mind of other people. Non-fiction may be presented either subjectively or objectively. There are both these cases. It can be subjective or objective. Non-fiction can also be written about fiction, typically known as literary criticism. Okay, so here the thing is that when some writer is writing fictional work, and if another writer will find some kind of problem with that work, so during that time, during that time if he wants to write something to criticize that work, then he will write criticism of that work. So non-fiction can also be written about fiction in the form of literary criticism, and in this way it is giving information and analysis on other works. Common literary examples of non-fiction includes expository, argumentative, functional, opinion pieces, essay on art or literature, biographies, memoirs, journalism, historical, scientific, technical or economic writing. Okay, so these are all kind of example of non-fiction work. They can be in the form of memoirs, or they can be a journal. Okay, so in this way, all these non-fictional writing are writing their work. These are also other example of non-fiction, the other forms of non-fiction, journals, blueprints, letters, photographs, diagrams, magazine articles, which are written on true events, textbook, travel book, expressions of imagination. Okay, so these all things can these all categories can be included under non-fictional work. Now, basically, there are two types of non-fictional work. First is informational, and the second is literary. The informational work will deal on the basis of information that the writer are getting from their surrounding. It is including general information of life, society, governance, laws, philosophy, religion, etc. For example, it include chronicles and religious writing about rules and law books, articles, reports. So all these things are based on information, and those things when a writer is writing, then that will be categorized under informational non-fiction. The second type of non-fiction is a literary non-fiction. Obviously, as per its name, it employs literary techniques to report on person, places, and events. It is also based on information, but to deal with that information, to write that information into paper, it required literary techniques. Without that techniques, it cannot be considered as a perfect example of literary non-fictional work. The examples including travel writing, nature writing, science writing, sports writing, biography, autobiography, memoir, the interview. Okay, so to write all kind of things, literary technique is required. Without that, it will not fall under this category. Now, what are autobiographical nonfiction? This type of writing is usually in first person point of view. Whenever a narrator, author, a writer who is writing his work of art, so that time he is using first person point of view. It means that the author is the main character in the story. Obviously, when a writer is writing from first person point of view, then he or she is supposed to be a main character because he is writing about himself, about his own experience. Shorter autobiographical nonfiction includes personal journal, diaries, and memoirs and letters. The great example which I have taken here about autobiographical nonfiction, that is the diary of Anne Frank. I hope that you all have heard her name. She is very much a popular Jewish girl. She has kept a diary while hiding from the Germans during World War II. And she used to write about everything, day to day life, and about her personal life also. She has written in her diary, and that is very much popular because this diary is a kind of representation of the problem of Jewish people, that which kind of problem they are facing. They are living underground in fear of Germans because those Germans, they are going to kill them, so that's why they are constantly living in fear. So Anne Frank, she has described each and every details in her diary. Now, I hope that non-fiction, the thing is clear in your mind. Now I will start with the first first age, pre-Chaucerian to Elizabethan age. Non-fictional writing started being written as early as the Anglo-Norman period, which is also termed as pre-Chaucerian period. Okay, so here the thing is that it is not that non-fiction are presented in this present time only, but during ancient time also these things are being written. But that time the forms of that non-fiction is different. Mostly chronicles and broods were written in that area. In the age of Chaucer, non-fiction writing moved to travelogue and religious translation. Here the point which I want to explain is that if you come from ancient to different ages, then you will find that the forms of non-fiction are differs according to different age, or in way we can say that there is a difference of numbers, that during ancient time more chronicles were written, and then in Chaucerian time travelogues and religious translations were written more. New form of non-fiction writing, autobiographies and biographies, were initiated in the age of revival. Okay, so again in next stage, again the another form of non-fiction were being imposed, that are autobiographies and biographies. The book of Margery Kempe, here I have taken example. This book was written around 1436, is believed to have been earliest autobiography in this field, and it records the experience of Margery Kempe. Elizabethan age witnessed the return to chronicles. Okay, so you have seen that the writing of chronicles was started from Anglo-Norman period, and then again Elizabethan period has witnessed the return of chronicles. But along with that, there are literary criticisms also. They are also very much popular in Elizabethan age. Now, here I have taken example from of the chronicles in Anglo-Norman period. The chronicles recorded the history of kings and were a major source of historical knowledge for medieval people. So mostly all these chronicles, the writers who are writing these chronicles, they are dealing with the histories of kings, and And when these chronicles were read by the other people, then it becomes a major historical source. It provides a true account of that histories of this king. These histories of chronicles were known in the vernacular as brutes, after Brutus, the eponymous founder of Britain. Okay, so this Brutus name was there after Brutus. I will explain this term brutes in next slides. The example of these chronicles were the Simon of Durham. Simon of Durham was an English chronicler and historian. His chief work is the Historia Ecclesiae Donalmensis. It is the history of the Bishopric of Durham. Okay, so in Simon of Durham, there is a kind of history of Bishopric of Durham, that the name of this place, and every detailed account of that history is written. The second example is Ordericus Vitalis. He was a historian and he has written Historia Ecclesiastica, which mainly dealt with the rule of William the Conqueror. Here you have seen that how these histories were being written for popular king from the histories. Now, brutes in Anglo-Norman period, brutes popularly related to legendary history of Britain. That's why its name is brutes. And it also tells the story of Brutus, the descendant of Annis. The story of Brute was first made popular by Geoffrey Monmouth's Historia Regum Britanniae. Okay, so in that Historia Regum Britanniae, Geoffrey Monmouth has presented the story of Brute, and it becomes popular with that work. Other example of brutes are Wace Roman the Brute. Wace was a Norman poet whose Roman the Brute is a French verse. Wace devotes much of his chronicles to Arthur's reign. Okay, so all these chronicles, all these historical events, they are dedicated to the Arthur's reign. Wace has written much about Arthur only. Second example is Layman's Brute. Layman was an English poet and a priest, and his Brute is a poetical paraphrase of the Brute of Wace. It begins with the fall of Troy and proceed with the story of Brutus. Okay, so here the thing is given that how he has started his writing Brute. First, he has started with the fall of Troy, and then he has written the journey with other Trojans through Mediterranean Sea until they finally reach the Isle of Avallon. Okay, so in this way, he has concluded his Brute. The third example is the Harley Brute. The anonymous Harley Brute consists of 3,359 verses. You can see that how much long these brutes are. Obviously, because these brutes were written on history, so that's why this length will be obvious. It is composed in Alexandrine monorhymed laces. The 5 portion of this text just covered a quarter of Geoffrey's Historia Regum Britanniae. Okay, so he has tried to cover the work of Geoffrey, but he is only able to complete the 5 portion of that. Okay, so that is about Anglo-Norman period, the chronicles and brutes. Now, the second age is Chaucerian age. In this age also, some writers have made this form of writing popular. The first one is John Mandeville. He is known as the author of the travel book, The Travels of Sir John Mandeville. Okay, he has explained his own experience of traveling because he has spent 34 years traveling throughout Asia and Northern Africa. And while traveling, he has just encountered different events in his life, and then he has written that events in the form of travelogue. His travel book became a major source for geographical information. Leonardo da Vinci and Christopher Columbus, these two people, they are also believed on this travelogue of John Mandeville, and they are relied on this Mandeville's book to travel further. Religion is the central focus of the book, and it sees Jerusalem as the center of the world. Okay, so this travelogue of John Mandeville, it is having a central focus of religion, and it also sees Jerusalem as a kind of center of the world. The narrator also shows his interest in wildlife and describes animals in great details. Okay, so while traveling, he has witnessed different kind of animals, and he has shown his interest in wildlife sanctuary by writing about them in his travelogue. Now, second example from Chaucerian age is John Wycliffe. He was described as the morning star of Reformation and was best known for his first complete translation of the Bible into English. Obviously, because he is the first one who has translated Bible into English, that's why this title was given to him, the morning star of Reformation. In 1382, Wycliffe was expelled from Oxford University because of his opposition to traditional church doctrines. In his translation also, he has did some kind of changes because something was there that was added by priest and some kind of authorities which he is not believing. That's why he was expelled also because of his opposition to traditional church doctrines. And after his exclusion, he was more determined to translate religious scriptures. Obviously, there is a kind of anger in his mind that why these people are not understanding the thing which I want to convey. So that's why after that exclusion, he has started writing more to open the eyes of the people. The common people can understand without the mediation of priests and authorities. What is his main motive of writing these religious scriptures? Because he just wanted to make common people understand that what is the truth behind all kind of things, all these things that priests are presenting or authorities are presenting. These are kind of lies. These mediocre, they are presenting false accounts. So to just do some kind of reformation, he is writing. The entire Bible was not translated by him. It was carried out under Wycliffe's inspiration and guidance by Nicholas of Hereford and John Purvey. Okay, these are the two names who has carried on this work of translation of Bible of John Wycliffe, because he was not able to translate full Bible. By translating this work, Wycliffe made it the property for all, even to women. Women who are facing some kind of inequality of this reading sacred text Bible. So for them also he has made this translation available so that they can also read, or they can read all kind of truth. Okay, that these are the two examples from Chaucerian age of non-fictional writer. Now the next age came is the age of revival. From this age also I have included two examples. First one is Reginald Peacock. He is the only great theologian of the 15th century, and his most important work is Repressor of Overmuch Blaming of the Clergy. And this work added a new dimension to the Lollard movement. You know that what is this movement is? All these followers of John Wycliffe, they are known as Lollards, and the movement that they have started is fall under this category of Lollard movement. Reginald Peacock's other work include the Book of Faith, a 15th century theological tract, and Donate, a careful graded guide to religious knowledge. These are his other two important works, non-fictional work. The second example from the age of revival is Sir John Fortex. He was an English jurist and political theorist. He has written the Laudibus Ligum Angli for the Prince Edward's instruction. And his writing can be divided into three parts: pamphlet of the succession, constitutional writing, and miscellaneous writing. These pamphlets on Lancastrian side were written in Scotland between the year 1461 and 1463. His work, the Laudibus Ligum Angli, is best known constitutional writing, and it is about the dialogue between Fortex and Prince Edward. Obviously, because Fortex is writing about the instruction of Prince Edward, so that's why he has presented this thing in form of dialogues. His miscellaneous writing include a dialogue between understanding and faith. It is a kind of brief tract on the miseries produced by the civil war. Now, the next is Elizabethan chroniclers and antiquaries. These antiquaries is also a kind of account of histories. The first example is John Foxe. He has published his Latin history of the Christian persecution, which became the first outline of his work, Acts and Monuments. And in the year 1563, he has published his first edition of Arts and Monuments. This is also known as Foxe's Book of Martyrs. It was again a massive volume of about 1800 pages, and it only covered English church history from Wycliffe until the accession of Queen Elizabeth. Uh, and this book was also being attacked by Catholic writers. You know that when a person is trying to highlight some kind of reality or truth through his work of art, so that time some kind of narrow-minded people will definitely attack. So same thing has John Foxe has faced. He has also his work was also got attacked by Catholic writers. Second example is from Elizabeth Chronicles, Raphael Holinshed. He was employed as a translator by Reginald Wolfe, and who was preparing a universal history. Okay, so first he was just working as an employer under this Reginald Wolfe. But after his death, he has started continuing that work because Reginald Wolfe was not able to complete universal history. So that's why Raphael Holinshed has started continue the work, but he has reduced the extent of the history of Britain. Obviously, he is not able to include universal history about each and everything. So that's why he has reduced some kind of events, and history of Britain was reduced to the extent. This work was appeared in much shortened version and published as Chronicles of England, Scotland, and Ireland. Here you can see that how the work, which was started as a universal history by Wolfe, was shortened in that much that it only include Chronicles of England, Scotland, and Ireland. Okay, so Raphael Holinshed is not able to include the universal history, so that's why he has shortened this work. And then it complete title was changed: Chronicles of England, Scotland, and Ireland. The book was dedicated to Sir William Cecil, and it begins with the description of Britain from the earliest times and carried until the reign of Elizabeth. Okay, so it is started from the Britain, and then uh, it ends the reign of Elizabeth. It also served as major source of Shakespeare's plays such as Macbeth and King Lear. Yes, Shakespeare, the famous playwright, he has written these historical plays, and for that he has taken inspiration or source from this history written by Raphael Holinshed. You can see that how these non-fictional work are a kind of account of truth and reality. So that's why so many writers are getting inspiration from those works. Now, during Elizabethan age, another thing is also came into light, that is literary criticism. That is a kind of non-fiction fiction. The example which I have taken is about George Gascoigne. He has written 13 notes of instruction, and this critical work was first appeared in Gascoigne's work, The Posies of George Gascoigne, Esquire, corrected, perfected, and augmented by the author. Okay, this is the longest title, and in that critical work, he has written about the notes of instruction. Here I have also taken some kind of paragraph from that work of Gascoigne, so that you will get idea that which kind of thing, which kind of criticism he has did in his work. The first and most necessary point that ever I found need to be considered in making of a delectable poem is this: to ground it upon some fine invention. Okay, so here you will get the idea that he has made criticism on the making of poems, that which kind of poetry should be there. It should be upon the ground of fine invention. For it is not enough to roll in pleasant wordies, nor yet to thunder in rhyme, ram, rough by letter. This is a quote by Master Chaucer. So what he is trying to explain is that poetries are not about only pleasant words and all this rhyming scheme, but there is supposed to be fine invention. Not only fine, but both fine and good. So on these things, he has written his criticism. Second critic from Elizabethan age is William Webs. He has written Discourse of English Poetry. Uh, Webb's discourse of English poetry, together with the author's judgment touching the reformation of our English verse. This is the long title of this critical work. It was written and published in the year 1586 and was dedicated to Edward Salliard. He attempts a historical survey of poetry and argues that scarcity of good English poetry since Chaucer's day was not due to lack of poetic ability, but due to the lack of proper system of prosody. Okay, so here again he has written criticism, the work of criticism for poetry, that which kind of poetry should be there. And then he has given the reason that there is the lack of proper system of prosody in poetry. He also comments on the work of his contemporaries by displaying his enthusiasm for Spencer Safford's calendar and admiration for Fair's translation of Virgil. Okay, so while criticizing the work of his contemporary, he has given example of the best poetries from this. He has taken Spencer and Fair's, and he is appreciating them to just make his point clear in his criticism. Okay, now next phase came is Puritan to the Romantic age non-fiction. During this age, the literary trends were heavy reflection of biblical texts, and there are diary writing also in Restoration age. You can see that the name Puritan, obviously this name, the title of that age give all kind of detail that which kind of work were being written in that age. These works are mainly about biblical text, and Puritans compared their own lives to biblical narratives and compared themselves with biblical characters. So here the thing is that Puritans, they are dealing with the biblical narratives, and in this way they are also comparing their life with those characters, and they are living on a kind of inspiration of those characters. During neoclassical age, emphasis was on reason and logic, whereas in romantic age emphasis was on emotion. Okay, so that is the common thing that we know, and the common difference between neoclassical and romantic age. Neoclassical here at one hand deals with logic, reason, whereas romantic age they are mostly writers of nature, and they are dealing with the emotions of common people rather than this logic and reason. Now, non-fictional work in Puritan age. Among the leading prose writers of Puritan age, these names are popular. These are Jeremy Taylor, Thomas Hobbes, and Richard Baxter. And they are writing about the classic King James version of the Bible. Use of fictional element was limited to the extent of blasphemy. Puritans believe that literature should not be used for entertainment. Here you can see that this narrow-mindedness of Puritans writer. They think this that literature is not for entertainment, and non-fictional thing which are fictional thing which are only writing about all false account and false events and characters, imaginary characters. So those things is not supposed to do in this literature. They think that there should be only non-fictional work, and it must be used in the service of religious discourse. Okay, so this kind of belief was there of the mind in the mindset of Puritan age writers. Here I have taken again two example non-fictional writers of the Puritan age. The first one is Sir Thomas Browne. His best well-known work was Religio Medici, which reflected on the nature of God and man. The book not only sets out his spiritual testament but also gives psychological portrait. On that account, there is one writer, Cole Munro. he has made this kind of statement. Here I wanted to tell you one thing, that why I'm adding this kind of quote or this kind of statement of some kind of critic or writer, because in your exam also you will have this kind of questions that some kind of statement or phrase was given, and you have to identify that who has stated that or from which work that phrase was taken. Cole Munro, he has says that variously described as a prose poem, confession of faith, and sort of private diary of the soul, the Religio Medici is hard to categorize. Okay, so in this way, he has just praised this work of Sir Thomas Browne, and he has said that it is very hard to uh, put this work under some kind of category, because it is a kind of diary also, and there is prose, poem, so and non-fictional work also. So all these things were, it can be fall under all these categories. So that's why it becomes hard to give a specific category to this work. Sir Thomas Browne, his other work include a book on superstition, Pseudodoxia epidemica, or vulgar errors, and hydrotapia or urn burial, which is centered on the discovery of Roman urn burial in Norfolk. Second one from that age is Jeremy Taylor. He was an English bishop and theologian, and after the restoration in 1661, he became Bishop of Down and Kenner in Ireland. He has written several works on theological and devotional subjects. Some of these examples were the rules and exercise of holy living and the rules and exercise of holy dying. Okay, so these are only two examples I have written. Now came a Restoration Age, non-fiction in Restoration Age. This age introduced a new genre in non-fiction in the form of diary besides journals. It also promoted non-fiction with full of intellectualism. Okay, so only those non-fictional writing which are having full of intellect qualities that are being promoted in this age. The work of Francis Bacon also helped in shaping philosophical and scientific method. Critical interest in Restoration prose was shown first time in the history of English literature. And English prose written in this age favors clarity, simplicity, and utility against ornamentation and affection. It means that basically they are functioning on writing simple non-fictional work without any kind of complexity or without any kind of ornamental language. One of the best example of non-fictional work of this age is Spratt's History of the Royal Society. The first example of the writer, non-fictional writer from this age is John Locke. He was an English philosopher, theorist, and physician, and his most important work, Essay on Human Understanding, was published in 1690. This essay deals is about the detailed systematic philosophy of mind and thought, and it is also divided into 4 books to focus on this mind and thought thing in detail. There is again one writer, Raphael de Rose. He has called the essay of Locke as a philosophical landmark, and he has praised his work and states that the work is best among philosophy of all time. Okay, so it is not best among the philosophy of Restoration Age only, but it is best among all the times of philosophy. His other works are commentaries on the Pauline Epistle, a discourse on miracles, a fragment of the 4th letter for toleration, and an examination of Father Malebranche's opinion of seeing all things in God. Okay, so these are his popular works, non-fictional work. Yes, these 4 books in which his essay on human understanding, the best philosophical work, was written. Book 1 deals with 3 goals of philosophical project. Then book 2, it is about the process by which ideas came in human mind. Book 3 is about the abstract general ideas, and then book 4, the concluding one, is about the addresses the nature of knowledge itself. In this way, John Locke, he has described the human understanding in detailed way in his essay. Now, next example is obviously John Dryden. Here I want to tell you one thing, that the thing which I like the most about this new net syllabus is that you will read the name of one writer for so many times, not only one, twice, thrice, so many times, because there is the categories like dramas, poetry, non-fictional, fictional. So you will have already heard his name in that fictional work, then in other short stories. So again, his name came in non-fictional, so that it will help to remember. Uh, John Dryden, he has written an essay of dramatic poesy. It can be seen as a defense of drama as an art form. Okay, so in this essay, he has uh, present a kind of debate or dialogue between four characters: Eugenius, Crites, Lycidius, and Neander. Okay, these are the false name he has given to a real person. Like Eugenius is for William the Venant, Crites is for Robert Howard, and Lycidius name is for Roger Boyle, and the last one, Neander, is for himself. Okay, so in his essay, Dryden has presented his own views also on this drama as an art form. Eugenius means a well-born genius, and Eugenius, what he is doing, he is favoring moderns over ancient. That moderns are best, and ancient are not as much best as like moderns. Then came the next critic, Crites. The name Crites came from Greek word critic, and he argues in favor of ancient. Okay, so you can see that how this debate was ongoing between these four characters. The third one, Lycidius, this name is probably based on the royal emblem of France, the fleur de lis. Lycidius argues in favor of modern day French playwright. Okay, so now he is favoring French playwright. The last one, Neander, means the new man, means Dryden himself. He is favoring modern but does not disparage the ancient. Okay, so in a way, he is favoring both. So in this way, Dryden has presented his own view by presenting a dialogue or debate between these four characters. This is a very much popular essay on dramatic poesy. Now, in Restoration Age, there are also mostly diaries were being written. Diary is essentially an autobiographical work, but yet different from autobiography, because diary is about day-to-day life event, and a person is writing diary, and in that he or she is also adding all kind of personal thing which he is not supposed to share. Diary tries to keep pace with the individual life. Diaries written in Restoration Age provides us an insight into the day-to-day life of that period. Okay, obviously, when a person is writing diary, then he or she will also write about the surrounding, that what kind of thing was happening. So, with that diaries, we can also get the idea that what is most popular during Restoration Age. Example of diarist which I have taken is John Evelyn, and his famous diary was begun when he was only 11-year old, and it was first published in 1818 under the title Memoirs Illustrative of the Life and Writings of John Evelyn. It covered the year between 1641 and 1697. Okay, so John, he has written his diary, and it is about the detailed explanation or covering the events between 1641 to 1697, that what kind of thing was happening during that time. It considered as an important historical record of the times, and it also considered of description of places and events. His other works are Of Liberty and Servitude, an essay on the first book of T. Lucretius, the Golden Book of Saint John Chrysostom, and the French Gardener. Okay, these are his other works. Second diarist is Samuel Pepys. He began his popular diary in the year 1660, and from 1660 to 1669, he kept an extraordinary diary with running commentary. of his daily rounds. Okay, so whatever he is writing, that what is doing during the day, which kind of meal he is eating, how is his health, everything he is used to write in his diary in the form of running commentary. And in that he has also written about his relation with his wife. Obviously, when a person is writing some kind of personal thing in his or her diary, that time they never wished to publish that diary. Same is the case with Samuel also. He do not want to publish his diary, but obviously after his death, it got published. When the diary published in 1825, they were held as an intimate glimpse at life in the Restoration era England. Okay, so Samuel, whatever he has written about daily accounts, he is also giving the detailed explanation of the life of the people who are living in Restoration era. Yes, here the smartest thing that he did in his diary is he has written it in a cryptic code so that no one can decipher that code or no one can read that diary. If someone will get mistakenly, so then also they will not able to read. So that's why he has written cryptic code. But still, after 150 years, a master student, his name is Lord Braybrooke, he has deciphered Samuel's diary code, and the first edition was got published. Now came the neoclassical age. Non-fictional work in neoclassical age brought into limelight the periodicals essay for the first time. Criminal biographies and travelogue also remained prominent. Francis Bacon was the first to introduce the essay, and that essay was forcefully and formally launched by Joseph Addison and Richard Steele. These are the two important major names of a period. They have started periodical essay, and together they have started the Spectator. But before that, Richard Steele has launched the periodical The Tatler. With that name, The Tatler, it is being published thrice a week, means 3 times a week. Okay, later on, Steele and Addison, they have joined hands and brought the publication, The Spectator. And The Spectator it was not published thrice a week, but it was a kind of daily paper. Here I have also added table on the name of periodical, then who has founded that periodical, and how many times it got published. The Tatler, it published thrice a week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, and it was introduced by Richard Steele. Then Joseph Addison and Richard Steele both have started the Spectator. It is having a daily publication. Then the Rambler, which was started by Samuel Johnson, and it published twice a week, Tuesday and Saturdays. Then the last one is also by Samuel Johnson, The Idler, and it is having weekly publication. Now, the example of non-fictional prose writers of neoclassical age. The first one is Joseph Addison. He was an English essayist, playwright, and politician. And in 1710, he began contributing essays to the Tatler. Okay, first he used to contribute his essay for this periodical that was started by Richard Steele. And then later on, he has joined his hand with Richard Steele and then started the Spectator. In his essay Pleasures of Imagination, which was appeared in the periodical Spectator on 2nd July, he distinguished between pleasure of imagination into two classes. First is primary pleasure and secondary pleasure. And there is also one excerpt which I have taken from that essay. Our sight is the most perfect and most delightful of all our senses. It fills the mind with the largest variety of ideas, converses with its objects at the greatest distance, and continues the longest in action without being tired or satiated with its proper enjoyment. Okay, so you can see that how he has explained in detail the pleasure of imagination, that which kind of thing was ongoing in our mind while having these kind of pleasures. Second one is Richard Steele. The thing about his publication Tatler, I have not added in this slide because that I have already told. He was an Irish writer and politician. He born in Dublin, and in 1701, The Christian Hero, his moralistic tract, was published. Then he has published a delightful letters titled Dear Prue, which he has dedicated to his second wife. Her name was Mary Skurlock. Okay, now the philosophers are also very much prominent in neoclassical age. First one is George Berkeley. He was an Anglo-Irish philosopher born in Kilkenny country, and his an essay towards a new theory of vision appeared in the year 1709, and a treatise concerning the principle of human knowledge in 1710. Okay, so these are his two major works. The objective of the first work, an essay towards a new theory, was to show that the manner wherein we perceive by sight the distance, magnitude, and situation of objects. Whereas in this second work, Principle of Human Knowledge, he has examined abstract ideas and stated that abstract ideas cannot be formed and are inconsistent. Second philosopher from neoclassical age is David Hartley. He was an English philosopher and founder of Associationist School of Psychology. His reputation as one of the founding fathers of the science of psychology rests on his two-volume work, Observation on Men. In first volume, he is dealing with the frame of the human body and mind and their mutual connection. Whereas in second volume, he is writing about the duty and the expectation of mankind. Again, there is a one writer, Robert Young. He has given a kind of statement on Hartley's observation. He said that his work was the first published work in English to use the term psychology in its modern sense. Hartley's principles provided the conceptual framework for the associationist tradition in modern psychology. Now, romantic age, non-fictional work in romantic age. You know that these romantic writers, they are mainly dealing with emotions and the true depiction and the common language for that can be read to common people. So this kind of thing was there in the mind of romantic writers, and even they are writing non-fiction on the basis of those things. Writers of the romantic age, they are focusing on natural world, and a lot of works talked about the rights and freedom of an individual. Essayists of the romantic age showed interest in the common man and reflect the feeling of humanitarianism. Okay, so in this way, romantic age is different from neoclassical age because they are showing their more interest in common people. First example is Mary Wollstonecraft. She is a very popular female writer, and her work Thoughts on the Education of Daughters with reflection on female conduct in the more important duties of life was published in 1787. And she also became a translator and an advisor to Joseph Johnson, who was a noted publisher of radical texts. In 1790, she has produced her work Vindication of the Rights of Men, and it is a kind of response to Edmund Burke's work. And in this work, she is attacking Burke's idea based on antiquity and tradition. She has smartly attacked all those ideas that are presented by him. And she is best known for her feminist tract, A Vindication of the Rights of Women. Obviously, on the basis of this title, you can think that which kind of thing she has written. She states that since childhood, women are taught to believe that they are inferior to men. They are taught to be docile and submissive. Okay, the problem of inequality between these genders, male and female, those things are also prominent during that time. So she has highlighted those issues in her work, and she has highlighted the problems that women are facing, how they are treating as a kind of inferior thing, and how they are dominated by men. So that thing she has written in her work, Vindication of the Rights of Women. Second example from romantic age is Charles Lamb. He was a romantic essayist born in London, and his best known work is the series of essays under his pseudonym Elia. Okay, so he has written a series of essays. The title of that essay is The Essay of Elia, and that he has written under this pseudonym. The name Elia was taken from a clerk in the South Sea House where Lamb used to work for some time. So that time he has think that he should use this name in his work. His intimate and conversational tone captivated the readers. William Hazlitt has also made a kind of a statement or for him uh, in his work, The Spirit of Age. He has remarked that Mr. Lamb has succeeded not by conforming to the spirit of age, but in opposition to it. He does not march boldly along with the crowd. Okay, so in this way, William Hazlitt has praised Charles Lamb, the work of Charles Lamb, because Charles Charles Lamb is known for going on his own path. He is not following all this crowd where all the crowd is going. He will go, but he has always known for his opposition. That's why William Hazlitt has praised or has shown his appreciation. Now, the Victorian and modern age non-fiction. And during this age, the writers are writing treatises, theses of size, and essays of unusual length. The author also wrote travel accounts, letters, lectures, and biographical to talk about various social cultural issues. Victorian prose explores intellectual debate on contemporary problems of religion, philosophy, politics, and arts. Okay, so by dealing with all kind of problems, the writers, they are writing about this problem that their society, Victorian society, is facing in their non-fictional account. The first example of prose writer is Thomas Carlyle. He was a Scottish philosopher, writer, and essayist. And his work, A Life of Schiller, was first appeared in London Magazine in 1823 and 1824. And from 1831 to 34, he has published Sartor Resartus, that is his most popular work. It was initially published as a series of Fraser's Magazine, subtitled The Life and Opinion of a Teofildro. His other important work is The French Revolution, which discusses the dangers and promises of revolution. So in this way, he is highlighting all kind of struggles or dangers that people are facing during French Revolution in his work. Second example is Thomas Macaulay. He was a British historian, essayist, and politician, and he has written collection of critical and historical essay in 1843. His other work, Lays of Ancient Rome, appeared in 1842, and a collection of critical and historical essay in 1843. But his major works, The History of England from the Accession of James II, was published between 1848 and 1861. In the year 1847, he was also made as Baron Lord Macaulay of Ruthley. So in this way, yes, you cannot remember all these dates, but it is okay if you remember some of this. All these things is not supposed to be known or learned by you. Now, non-fictional prose writer of the modern age. The first example is Alfred George Gardiner. He has joined the Northern Daily Telegraph, and in 1889 he was appointed as editor of Blackburn Weekly Telegraph. And he was also invited to choose the name of a star as a pseudonym, and that time which name he has chosen, he has chosen Alpha Star, that is the brightest star. And then in his work, The Plug, he has added that his essays are uniformly elegant, graceful, and humorous. These are the name of his other works: Pillars of Society, Pebbles on the Shore. Okay, these are some of his main work. The second example from non-fictional prose writer is Edward Verrall Lucas. He has worked as a journalist in Sussex and London, and his work, The Open Road, followed by well over 100 titles. His travel writings are principally represented by his A Wanderer in series, and he has also published introductory studies of Painter. And among those introductory studies of Painter, these two are popular: Vermeer of Delft and John Constable, the Painter. And then he has also produced the standard edition, The Work of Charles Lamb and Mary Lamb, and wrote the authoritative life of Charles Lamb. You can see that he is very much influenced by Charles Lamb, so that's why he has written about him, about his work, about him as a non-fictional work. Now, this is the last topic for this presentation, non-fictional prose, that is contemporary American non-British fiction. During contemporary age, there is a kind of difficulty in discriminating between fiction and non-fiction. The reason is obvious that even the writers who are writing non-fictional work in the category of non-fictional, they are also writing false account or a fake thing. So that's why that thing was become difficult in this era. And postmodernism played a major part in reducing the barriers between fiction and non-fiction. There is one statement also about Nietzsche. He has said that there are no truths, only interpretation. Okay, so he has boldly made this statement that whatever this thing non-fictional was, but the reality is that there are not any kind of truth that they are writing. They are only writing about their own interpretation. The first example from contemporaries was Rose Macaulay. After the World War I, she concentrated on prose and wrote many essays and published some of her serious work in two collections, a casual commentary and catchwords and claptrap. Through these works, she gained respect and became one of the more prominent literary figures of her time. And then she has also written some kind of travel writings like They Went to Portugal, Evelyn Waugh, Fable Shore, etc. Second one is Dame Rebecca West. Rebecca West was a pseudonym of Cicely Isabel Andrews. She was born in London. She was a British journalist and critic who was best known for her report on Nuremberg trials of war criminals. And from 1911, she also became involved in journalism and contributed frequently to the left-wing press. Okay, she is in support of left-wing party, so that's why she is also started writing for that. She made a name for herself as a fighter for women's suffrage. You know that this term suffrage means right to vote. For that, she has fight a lot and made her position as a fighter. In 1916, she published a critical biography of Henry James that revealed her intellectual curiosity. And then she has also written several kind of essays in Daily Telegraph, New Republic, and her book Black Lamp and Grey Falcon is also considered as the best example of classic literature, and it includes travel, culture, politics. The last part in this contemporary is non-British and non-American fictional non-fictional writers. The first is Helen Garner. She is an Australian writer, and she was fired from her teaching job after the publishing in the Digger, a counterculture magazine. Okay, so she has added some kind of work, non-fictional work in this magazine, the Digger, and for that she was fired from her teaching job. You know that a teacher is not supposed to speak so bluntly or boldly about all kind of truths and reality, but she did that courage, and because of that she was fired. Her second famous controversial book is The First Stone. It is an account of 1992 sexual harassment scandal at Ormond College. Okay, about that sexual harassment she has written, and this is her most controversial book. And these are her other works like True Stories, Selected Nonfiction, The Feel of Steel, etc. The last one, and non-British American non-fictional writer, is Umberto Eco. He is both fictional and non-fictional writer, and he born in Italy. He has developed ideas on open text and semiotics and wrote many essays on these subjects. Among those works, his major works are The Aesthetics of Thomas Aquinas, Art and Beauty in the Middle Age, and The Open Work. Okay, so this is all about non-fictional prose writer from ancient Anglo-Norman period to contemporary modern period. And I have tried my best to add some kind of important details, but still I have only added two examples from each and every ages. So to conclude, I just wanted to say that you can see that according to different age, the different categories of non-fictional are popular. Like it's some age are having more diaries writing, some ages in some ages people are writing more travelogue. In this way, they are discriminating their non-fictional work. Okay, so I hope that this point, non-fictional work, is clear to you. Thank you for listening. And yeah, one more thing, best of luck for your upcoming NET exam.
Thank you very much, Hema, for conducting all the sessions very well and for covering the major part of paper too. So we are very thankful to you for these sessions. And yes, today is the last session by Ms. Goswami. So if anyone has any questions, then you can ask her.
Hello.
Yes, if anyone have any kind of question, please ask.
Good evening, ma'am. This is Ravindra.
Yes,
I
good
have one
evening.
or two questions regarding John Wycliffe and Francis Bacon. Okay. So first, I would like to ask
Ha.
about John Wycliffe. As you said that John Wycliffe has translated Bible into English. Okay.
Yes,
So I have
yes.
read somewhere there are two type of Bible. One is originally written in
Hmm.
Hebrew and one was in Latin. So which Bible that John Wycliffe has translated? Hebrew Bible or Latin Bible?
About that, I don't know exactly, but I only have added the thing that he has translated the Bible into English, and he was known as the first translator who has translated that Bible into English, and before that, no one has translated in this English language. Okay, so that Hebrew Bible and that part about the Bible, that is not known to me. Also, I only know that he has did that work, did that translation into English, and that was very much controversial also, because he is kind of negotiating the position of mediocre, the priest and authoritative, through his work, and even after his death also, this translation was completed by his disciples. He has not completed the whole translation himself.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay.
And one more question, may I?
Yes, yes,
Yeah, okay. Sir Francis Bacon. Okay. As
yes,
you said that he is the first person who introduced the essay.
yes.
But according
Father
to
of
my
English
point of
essay.
view, what I have read, okay, father of English. Montaigne is the father of essay, ma'am. So it is also
Francis Bacon.
controversial.
No,
Let me
I.
clear my point first.
Yes,
French writer Montaigne and his first work was Essays on Man in 1581, and Francis Bacon timing was 1591 to 1625. I'm not sure about the timing, Francis Bacon timing. So I have confusion that who has introduced essay in English, Francis
okay.
Bacon
So here,
or
yes,
Montaigne?
yes. Here the point which I want to highlight is that it is upon that who has did their work well. Obviously, that Montaigne name was also popular, but if we look on the essay of Francis Bacon, he has did a well job in this field essays, and that's why he is known as father of English essay. He is not known father of English essay because he has did earlier or at the very first account. Yes, obviously there used to be another writers also who has written essays before him, but still their work are not popular that much. Their work had not get that much popularity as like Francis Bacon. So that's why he is
Okay,
considered as a father. You know, yes, one point I want to tell is that there are so many writers from different ages, and they are writing about all kind of things, fictional, non-fictional, essay, criticism. But all I cannot be considered as a kind of father and these things. Only that writer who has written some kind of best thing about that are also included as they are also getting this kind of category or title.
okay.
Yes,
So if we will be asked in an exam that who has a father of English essay, so
yes,
what should we write?
obviously for
Montaigne or
that.
Francis Bacon?
Yes, yes, for that, Francis.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay.
That's it.
Hema, there is one question in the chat box by Niro Makwana, if you can see.
Yes, ma'am, I will see.
Yeah.
Yes, Nirav Makwana, he has written about Indian non-fictional writer. I have not added any Indian names for that, but he is asking that which name should be included in non-fictional. So I think that is not supposed to be a question, because you can include both this name about Kamala Das and Mahatma Gandhi if they have written this work, autobiographies and grandmother's house, and they will be under this category of non-fictional. Then you can add both this example in non-fictional work. Okay, so there are so many Indians writer also who has written this kind of autobiographies, diaries, journals. So all these thing examples you can include in these categories. Okay, so there is not supposed to be add like to whom can we consider as an Indian non-fictional writer. There are so many. There's not only one. Okay, I hope that I have cleared your doubt, Nirav Makwana. Any more questions?
Okay, participants, you'll get today's presentation and a quiz in Google Classroom by tonight. And all the previous presentation by Hema is already attached in Google Classroom. So I have shared the code of the classroom as well. So you can, yes, really, you will get the link of the lecture also in Google Classroom. So I would request the participants, those who haven't joined, please join the classroom. You'll get all the presentation and quiz link. And I think it will be beneficial for you for some last time revision. So thank you so much, Hema, once again, and looking forward to see you again next year. And best wishes to all the participants. See you all tomorrow at 4 with the new session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Emma.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, for tomorrow the topic is from paper 1.
Okay, paper one will be there.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Welcome.